All right, today we have part 4, Way of the Warrior Kid. Chapter 13, Pull Up number 1. Yes, I did it. I finally, after 18 days of training, today I did my first pull up by myself. It was pretty easy too. I did some push ups at the beginning of the workout, and I actually got my record there too, with 22. And then I did some sit ups and a few squats. Then it was time to do pull ups. So I went and got to that big box that Uncle Jake built for me to jump up on when I do my pull ups. But when I slid it underneath the bar, Uncle Jake said no. I was pleased. I was puzzled. Why? Why don't you want me to do pull ups today? Quite the opposite, Mark, he answered. You're ready to do an actual pull up today. Oh no, I thought to myself. For the previous 3 weeks, all of my pull up workouts have included just negative pull ups. I have I have only been doing something called the negatives, which where I jump up on the box so I can get my chin over the bar, and then once I get there, I would try to hold it as long as I could, and then I would slowly come down, lowering myself as slowly as possible, fighting it the whole way down. And once I was at the bottom, I would jump up and get my chin over the bar again. So actually, this was a pull-up workout, but I actually wasn't doing any pull-ups. I don't think I'm quite ready yet, I told Uncle Jake. Oh, you're ready, and even if you aren't, you need to try. We have to assess your progress. Well, I'm definitely holding myself up there for a long time now, I told him. When we started, I was only able to hold myself up for a couple of seconds. Now I can hold myself up over 30 seconds. Well, that's good progress, Uncle Jake said, but your goal isn't holding yourself up. Your goal is to do an actual pull up. So let's see what you got. Uncle Jake pulled away the tall box and allowed me to jump my chin over the bar and replace the short box that Uncle Jake pulled away the tall box that allowed me to jump my chin over the bar and replaced it with a short box that made it so I could barely even reach the bar. There you go, giddy up. I was filled with fear. Every time I had tried in the past, no matter how hard I pulled, I could never get my chin above the bar. Now that Uncle Jake was standing right there after all the work that he has done with me, I just didn't think I'd be able to do it. I stood there just looking at the bar. Well, what are you waiting for? I slowly stepped up to the bar and reached up and grabbed it. The bar was cool in my hands, and I noticed something that I hadn't thought about: my grip. In the past, my grip always felt like it was going to slip off the bar. My grip felt different now. It felt strong. I concentrated, and then after taking a big breath, I pulled and went all the way up. And yeah, as soon as my chin cleared the top of the bar, I had done it. I let myself down slowly and dropped off the bar. I looked at Uncle Jake. He had a big smile on his face. A big smile. He was happy. And I was even happier. It felt so good. I looked at Uncle Jake and yelled, "Yeah!" as I curled both of my fists toward my shoulders like I had seen weightlifters do in magazines. And I could actually tell that for the first time in my life, I was starting to get some muscles. Nothing huge, but they were certainly there. "Muscle Man Mark," I shouted it, as proud as I could be. Then I saw Uncle Jake's smile disappear. "Hold it right there, Muscle Man," said Uncle Jake. I didn't know what was wrong, but something was. "I think it's a bit early for a celebration." Early? I just did my first pull up of my life, and I think it's perfect time for celebration, I told Uncle Jake. "That's a problem." "A problem? Why is a pull up a problem?" Not that the pull up. It's not the pull up, Mark. It's the celebration. It's way too early to be celebrating. But I just did my first pull up ever. But your goal isn't one pull up, it's 10 pull ups. You did one, sure. You have a reason to be happy. One pull up is definitely better than zero, but it's a long way from 10. And no matter what you're doing in life, you can't take your eyes off the long term goal, especially to celebrate. You can assess and you can try to figure out some lessons learned from what you did right and what you did wrong, and you can even do a little celebrating for the small victories. But don't go overboard. You need to keep your head in the game. So come over here, give me a high five, and let's get back to work. Uh, and we'll get back over there and start doing some more work on the pull up bar. This is actually the beginning. I walked over to Uncle Jake, who brought his hand up in the air. I slapped it hard, and he said, "Solid work. Now get back over there and let's get after it." "Yes, sir," I told him. I walked back over to the bar and actually did 3 more individual pull ups before I needed to get the bigger box to jump up with. And then I did a bunch of negative work. co- coming down as slowly as I could. Knowing that I'd already made some real progress made me feel even more focused. 10 pull ups is a long way, but I started to think I might just get there. Chapter 14, Flashcard Fury. I'm starting to learn some things about Uncle Jake that are very important to understand. While yesterday I learned not to celebrate too early, today I realized something else. Good is never good enough. Today was a perfect example. I was sitting down in the afternoon when Uncle Jake was at the store. I decided to watch some TV, which is something I haven't exactly had a lot of time to do lately. When Uncle Jake got home and saw me sitting there watching TV, he didn't look very happy with me at all. "What are you doing, Mark?" he asked with a disappointed tone. "Just sitting there watching some TV." "I can see that. Why don't you have anything else better to do?" "Well, we've already worked out today, and my room is clean, and I did the dishes and cleaned the kitchen, so I'm pretty much all caught up with everything." "Really? What about your times tables?" "My times tables?" I'd been hoping he would ask that. I've been studying hard and knew all the timetables from 1 to 13 by heart at this point. I knew all of them. Every flashcard, 100%. 100%? Good, go get them. The flashcards? Yeah, the flashcards, I'll be the judge. Okay, I ran up to my room and got the flashcards. And when I came back down, Uncle Jake was pulling something out of his gym bag. It looked like a big watch. "What's that?" I asked him. "A stopwatch." "A what?" "A stopwatch, to time you." "Time me?" "Yeah, time you, to see if you're fast enough." "Fast enough? This isn't a race," I complained. "Everything's a race," replied Uncle Jake, with an evil smile on his face. "Give me those cards." Hesitating and a little nervous, I handed the cards to Uncle Jake, and we sat down at the table. "Ready?" Uncle Jake asked. "Ready," I replied, starting to feel the pressure. "Go." He pressed the start button on the stopwatch and held up the first card. It was 5 times 3. 15, I said. He held up the next card, which read 2 times 4. 8, I barked. He held up the next card, and he held up 9 times 6, which for some reason, maybe the pressure of the stopwatch or something, but I blanked for a few seconds. And then I dug through my brain and remembered 54, I yelled. "Slow," Uncle Jake said as he held up the next card. We went through the whole pile, and there were some that I hesitated on, and I actually missed too. But since I corrected them before I could even put them back in the pile, that meant I didn't have to answer them again. And as soon as I finished, Uncle Jake slapped down the last card and pressed stop on the stopwatch. I raised my hands over his head. I raised my hands over my head. I called out I was super excited that I'd gotten every one of the cards right. "Yeah, what?" Uncle Jake asked me. I knew from the pull up that I should never celebrate too early, but this wasn't early. The mission was accomplished. Or so I thought. "Well, Uncle Jake, I'm excited because I made it all the way through the times tables. That means I've learned." "Thanks so much for helping me, Uncle Jake. I couldn't have done it without your help." "That's not true. I only helped you learn one group of numbers. You learned the rest on your own. Once you learned how to learn, you were able to learn on your own." "I guess that's kind of true," I said, not sure where Uncle Jake was heading with the conversation. "But you're not done yet." "I'm not?" "No. I took It took you 6 minutes and 37 seconds to get through the flashcards. You should be doing it in less than 4 minutes." "4 minutes? Really?" "Really," Uncle Jake replied. I want you to know these answers so well that there isn't any hesitation whatsoever. None. Understand?" "Yeah, I understand," Uncle Jake continued. "And that's why you should do everything, the absolute best you can. Give it everything you've got, 100%. That's where you're going. That's where you're going to want to be." And with that, I started studying again, now timing myself and using Uncle Jake's stopwatch. I was going to get there for sure. Chapter 15, Tap Out. Today was crazy, unbelievable, nuts, amazing at Jiu-Jitsu class. I got to class and we did the normal warm-up stuff that was always fun to do. Run around the mat, push-ups, sit-ups, some rolls, and all that basic stuff. Then we did our drills where we worked on the basic moves, arm locks, sweeps, the escaping mount position. We were about halfway done with class when a new kid showed up. It was his first day. He had never done jiu-jitsu before. While we were drilling some moves, I saw the instructor going over the basics with him, and the kid was showing him what jiu-jitsu was all about, what the basic positions were, and also the most important, how to tap out. Then it was time to roll. Rolling in jiu-jitsu is when you're sparring against your opponent. It's kind of like a real fight, except without kicking or punching. But you learn pretty quick that on the ground, kicking and punching aren't as important as people think. What's more important is being in the right position so you can control your opponent. And then when the time is right, make him tap out for some kind of joint lock or choke. A joint lock is when you tap your opponent's arms and leg in such a way they can't move, and they actually move in the opposite direction. The direction of an arm or a leg is not supposed to go. But don't worry, you don't hurt your opponents. As soon as they feel the tension in their arm or leg, all they have to do is tap out and you let go. It's all over. It's the same thing. It's like a choke. You put your arms in a position around their neck to choke them, and in a second they tap out. We also learned that to only do jiu-jitsu in jiu-jitsu class when the instructor is there. It's important to have an instructor around when you train to make sure that we're practicing safe and effective jiu-jitsu. I rolled with a couple of the other kids in class for the first 2 rounds, and then the instructor called me, "Come over here, Mark." I went right over to the instructor and said, "Yes, sir." "Mark, this is Jaden." "Jaden, this is Mark." I shook hands with the new kid. "Hi, Jaden." "I want you to roll with Jaden, please." "Mark." "Yes, sir." Then the instructor looked at Jaden and said, "Just relax and have fun. And remember, if it hurts or if it's uncomfortable, just tap, and Mark will let you go, and you can start again. It's okay to tap. It just means you're learning, okay?" "Okay," Jaden said. We walked around an open area of the mat, and Jaden was a little bit smaller than me, but not too much, just maybe an inch or two shorter. And I held out my hand and we shook hands. As soon as we stepped back from shaking hands, Jaden rushed at me. I guess he wasn't going to relax like the instructor asked him to. As he moved forward, he tried to get a hold of my hands and arms and grabbing me like a giant crab. And I pushed his hands away, and as soon as he came forward, I ducked underneath his arms easily, a hold of his legs, and then I drove forward like I'd been taught, a classic double takedown. And when he got on the ground, Jaden really started going crazy. He wasn't pushing and bucking or squirming around, but he didn't know what he was doing. He didn't know what to push, or when to buck, or when to squirm. I easily got the position of full mount on him, where I was sitting on his belly like I was riding a horse. When I got there, Jaden pushed his hands into my chest to try to get me off of him. This was something that people who do not know jiu-jitsu usually try to do. They try to push you off of them, and when I knew that, in an instant I spun to the side and threw one leg over his head. I held on to one of his arms with my arms and squeezed my knees together and leaned back, and I went back. I felt Jaden squirm even more, but it was no use. I had him. I slowly pushed my hips into his elbow joint, and very quickly Jaden tapped out. That was it. The first time I'd ever tapped someone out. Yes! But even though I was super excited and fired up that I was able to tap out, I knew I needed to tap out Jaden. I knew I needed to stay calm and be nice to him. Don't worry, Jaden. It happens to everyone when you start out. Really? Yes, really. That's what jiu-jitsu does. It's like knowing how to play piano or shoot a basketball. It's just a skill that you need to practice. Once you practice and get good at it, you'll be tapping people out too. "Well, that's good. Is there anything I should have done different?" Jaden asked. I spent the rest of class going over some basic moves with Jaden. He was happy and definitely wanted to learn. And now that I've actually felt the true power of jiu-jitsu, I wanted to learn more too. Chapter 16. Fueling the Machine. One thing I can tell you about all this training and working out and studying is it makes you hungry. By the end of the day, I always felt like I'm starving and ready to eat anything and everything. And that's kind of what I've always done. Just eat whatever I wanted to eat whenever I wanted to eat. Until tonight. Tonight I learned something else from Uncle Jake. This time was about food. So like I said, when I went downstairs for dinner, I was hungry and thirsty, and my mom had made some dinner. But I was in the mood for something a little tastier, so I grabbed a bag of potato chips and poured a bunch into my plate. And then I went to the freezer and grabbed a microwavable ham and cheese sandwich and threw it in the microwave. They are tasty. I heated it up for a couple of minutes until the cheese was oozing out of the sides, and then grabbing it from the microwave, I opened the plastic bag and threw it on my plate next with a pile of potato chips. Finally, because I was thirsty, I grabbed a can of grape soda from the fridge and walked over to the table where my mom and Uncle Jake were sitting. "How's it going?" I said as I sat down. "Outstanding," Uncle Jake replied. "How are you doing?" "Pretty good," I said. And right as those words came out of my mouth, Uncle Jake looked down at my plate, then at my can of grape soda, and then back at me. "Really?" he said in a stern voice, his mood changing suddenly from happy to almost angry. I had no idea what he could possibly be mad at me about. Yeah, I mumbled under my breath, I'm doing okay. Uncle Jake seemed to relax a little bit and then said, That's surprising. Why is that surprising, Uncle Jake? I asked. I was truly curious to why the heck he was acting so strange. It's surprising you can feel okay with all that junk you're eating. I had no idea what he was talking about. My mom nodded in agreement. Junk? Yeah, junk. That's what you have on your plate right now, junk. It won't help your muscles recover, and it won't help you think clearly. And all that junk won't help you get better. I still didn't understand. Wait, what? What's wrong with my food? This is what my mom buys, and this is what I eat every day. You eat this every day? How can you eat that every day? And isn't and it isn't the only thing that your mom buys. I got this from the same kitchen you got your plate from, as he pointed down at his own plate. I took a look at his plate, and I had to admit to myself he was right. He had a salad and some chicken on his plate, and he was drinking a big glass of water. But I still didn't understand. Wait, what's the difference between what you're eating and what I'm eating? What's the difference? Everything. Chicken has protein in it, which is used to rebuild your muscles, and the fats from the oils, which I need to help, which helps make your body function. And the salad has all kinds of minerals and nutrients to keep you healthy. You know how much of this good stuff is in the garbage you're eating? I'm not really sure. None, zero, zip, nada. You're eating and drinking a bunch of sugar. All that does is make you sick and drain your energy. And you need to get a grip on your fuel intake. Fuel intake? I had no idea what he meant by this. What am I, a car? You aren't a car, but you are a machine like a car. The food you eat is like fuel. If you put the wrong fuel in your car, the car doesn't work anymore. So you need to fix that ASAP. Okay, so what should I eat? You need to eat real food. Steak, fish, chicken, eggs, pork, salad, vegetables, nuts, and seeds. Stuff that is real food, not stuff that comes from a factory like potato chips or a sandwich. And I do buy you plenty of good food, Mark. You just need to eat it instead of the snack food, my mom chimed in. Okay, I get it. Tomorrow I'll start to eat real food, just like that. Tomorrow? What do you mean tomorrow? Well, I don't want you to waste the food. I don't want to waste the food, I told Uncle Jake, thinking that he would at least allow me to enjoy this one last tasty meal. Wrong answer. There's only one time to start making yourself better, and that's now. You need to start now, not tomorrow, not next week, not next month, not next year, now. So go throw that food in the garbage, pour that soda down the drain, and you need to put the right fuel in your machine. Yes, Uncle Jake, I looked at my mom to see if she would be upset for the wasted food, but she nodded, yeah, go throw it away. I went and threw out the potato chips and the sandwich, and then poured the grape soda down the drain, and then made myself a plate of chicken and salad, and I poured myself a glass of water. When I sat back down, my mom said, and just to make this easier for you, I'm not going to buy any more of that junk food. Just real food. That way you have an option of not eating any junk. Okay, Mom, I told her. I wasn't sure if food would make a difference, but I did know this. If it's good enough for Uncle Jake, it was good enough for me. Chapter 17, Fish in the Water. I was not ready for what Uncle Jake did to me today. At least I didn't think I was. For the past few weeks, Uncle Jake had been taking me to the river every other day to swim. He calls it a swim day, as he calls it. First, I waded in the water, then I dunked my head, and then he taught me to tread water, which is what you is what you do when you stay in one place and keep your head above the water. From there, he taught me to float in the water without moving, which is called the dead man's float. And after that, he started teaching me how to swim. A basic way of swimming is called a crawl stroke. It wasn't too bad, and I've been getting better and better at doing it. The last times I've actually been swimming without touching the bottom. But when I got to the creek today, Uncle Jake said, "Are you swimming across the creek, the whole thing and back?" Sure, I was feeling good and comfortable when we drove down, but when he said those words, I nearly had a panic attack. Swim all the way across? Are you kidding me? I felt pretty good swimming along the beach side of the river, especially because I knew if things got out of control, I could just stand up. But swimming across I got about 15 feet from the shore, I wouldn't be able to touch the bottom. I'd be helpless, just like I was back in the koi pond when I was a kid. I don't think I'm quite ready for that, Uncle Jake, I told him. You are ready, I know. And if you don't think you're ready, you better get ready, because you're going to do it today. But, Uncle Jake, no buts, Mark. I'm telling you, you're ready. You're going to do it. I'll drown, I said. The words kind of just slipped out. I really didn't think I would drown. Okay, maybe I did think it a little bit. You're not going to drown, Mark, Uncle Jake said, sounding pretty annoyed with me. I might, I told him. No, you're not going to drown. You're going to be perfectly fine. I won't let you drown. And I'll be right next to you. In SEAL teams, we never do anything in the water alone without someone watching us. No one should ever do anything in the water alone. You need to have someone to watch and make sure you're safe. It's called a swim buddy. And I'll be yours. You will? That made me feel kind of better. Of course, Uncle Jake. I wouldn't let anything happen to you. Yeah, I will. And I'll make sure nothing happens to you. Are you ready? Yeah, let's go. Okay. So we waded out in the water, and I was focused, very focused. I looked at the other side of the river, which was about 30 yards away, and I figured it would take me about 20 strokes to get across. I looked at Uncle Jake, and he nodded as if to say, go. I guess I needed a little bit more than just a head nod because I just sat there looking at him. Finally, he said, well? I said back, well, what? He raised his voice and said, we'll go. I looked across the river, looked back at him, and took a deep breath and lunged forward into the depths. Uncle Jake went right along with me, which made me feel very safe and calm. I knew nothing would happen to me while Uncle Jake was right next to me, and I did the stroke the way he had taught me, and it worked perfectly. I focused on the other side and kept concentrating, and felt the comfort of having Uncle Jake right next to me. The bank on the other side got closer and closer, and I started to feel for the bottom with my toes on each stroke. And finally, about 5 feet from the bank, my toes touched the bottom, and I pushed myself to the bank, and I made it. I looked over at Uncle Jake and smiled. He flashed his big smile back at me. I made it, I yelled. I made it, I made it. Just as I finished my final triumphant yell, Uncle Jake disappeared underwater. I don't know what he was doing, but he was down there for a while, and when he finally came up, he was all the way on the other side of the river. I was alone. What are you doing, Uncle Jake? I called out in a loud voice. You're fine, he shouted. Just swim back to me. What? I yelled. That's not cool. At all. I had made it all the way over, but I definitely didn't think I'd be able to make it back, not by myself. I said you'd be fine, and you are. Now just swim back over here to me. I was torn, because I didn't want to look like a wimp or drown, so I decided to go with looking like a wimp. Actually, Uncle Jake, I would be a lot more comfortable if you would swim over here so you can swim back with me. I hoped his understanding of how scared I was would shine through, but it didn't. No, I'm not going to come over there. You made it there, and you can make it back. Trust me. Wait, isn't trust something that people say when they aren't telling the truth? And besides, he had already told me he was going to stay close to me. How can I trust him? Finally, I said, well, I don't think this is a very good idea, and maybe you could please come over here and Uncle Jake cut me off. This is a very good idea. You know how to swim, you made it there, and you can make it back. Now on the count of 3, go. 1, 2, 3, go. And for some reason, which I may never understand, when he got to 3 and said go, I made an instant decision. I pushed off the bank, and I started to swim. I felt scared alone at first, but I focused on the other side and kept swimming. Each stroke brought me closer and closer to Uncle Jake and the sandy little beach on the other side. Then, just when I really felt comfortable with it, I felt my foot touch the bottom. I had made it. Uncle Jake smiled again and said, okay, you can hoot now. This was the loudest I'd ever yelled in my life. I looked at Uncle Jake and said, I'm like a fish in the water. And I waited for him to yell. Well, fish in the water, he said. And just remember, you still owe me a jump off that bridge eventually. I sat there in silence, but the message was clear. I still have a lot to prove, and as I looked up at the top of that bridge, I knew I wasn't quite ready for that yet. All right, and that concludes our latest part of Way of the Warrior Kid. We'll finish next time. Not finish. We will continue next time. Bye for now.